Hello, this is Lucretia with the Calm and Confident You podcast. Today I'm going to talk with you about anxiety related to events in your community, your nation, and or in the world that are outside of your control. I often have people talk with me about their fears and worries and anxiety about the world. They worry about things happening in our own country and in other countries around the world. They worry about ongoing difficulties, such as drugs coming into the country, all of the overdoses and deaths, and other concerns, such as COVID. Then, when a major event takes place, something frightening, dangerous, and especially out of their control, their anxiety spikes. Mine does too. The question is, how do we manage ourselves and our own anxious response to these things that are much larger than ourselves? First, I do think it is important to be aware and to know the facts about what is going on around you and in the world. I also believe it can be difficult to get the actual facts in a balanced manner. I also believe there is much we simply just don't know. We don't have all of the information. Still, I do not think it is best to completely ignore it and to live our lives in la-la land, not really knowing what is going on around us. I would much rather be informed. But then what can we do? Of course, we can get involved in our own communities, in organizations that we support. We can contact our government officials and even write or speak publicly on topics of concern. We can always donate to the organizations that we support, and hopefully they can make a difference in a positive way. But what about our own anxiety that is going off the charts over things that we cannot control? One thing we can do is check the news enough to know what's going on, but take long breaks away from it. It does no good to immerse yourself in it and ruminate on it and continue to worry about it. So remember to get away from it. Take really good breaks away from it. As our worries increase, we experience the actual physical changes that go along with anxiety or panic or fear. We know this as the fight or flight response. If you were to check your heart rate, which many of us can do when we're wearing our Fitbits or the other ways that we monitor our exercise and our health, you might notice that your heart rate is faster. Even without a monitor to tell you, you can probably, if you stop for a moment, notice if you are breathing shallowly or quickly. Notice if your muscles are tense, if you haven't moved for a while. It becomes important to actually check in with yourself. I have been talking about this over the past few episodes related to stress management in general. But if some event is getting you distressed, it becomes even more important to remember to do a self-check. I have found myself in that situation today. I noticed that when my mindfulness bell went off to remind me to stop and be mindful for a minute, I was resistant to it. I was so intensely looking at the news and thinking about all that's going on that I didn't want to stop and do the mindful moment. Luckily, I was aware enough to remind myself that that is the very thing I needed to do. 2 or 3 times today I stopped, noticed my breathing, settled down, noticed how I felt throughout my body, and brought myself to the here and to the now. I also made sure to get out and run some errands away from my home and with the company of my son. I also made sure today to go for a good long walk. When I began that walk, I started out thinking about all of the things I was worrying about. Again, I caught myself and reminded myself to look around at nature while I was walking. To my benefit, I came across swaths of fallen leaves from the trees which are changing because of fall. The leaves were crispy and made that nice sound they make as you walk through them. I brought my focus to that and really made sure that I kicked those leaves around and made the most of it. It really was refreshing. I will also add that there are some actions we can take. This week, as I paid bills, I received the usual flyer that comes in the fall from the power company. They encourage citizens to become prepared for an emergency, such as a power outage that might last several days. They included a list of items that everyone should gather and have on hand. I happen to have many of those things, and you probably do too. It is good to have something like candles that you could use for light if needed. It is good to have extra batteries on hand for flashlights and other items. It is good to have a little radio that can run on batteries, or that can even run on solar power, so that you can get the news if needed. It is good to have at least 3 days' worth of water on hand for each person who lives in your household, and that comes to about 1 gallon of water per person per day. I noticed something on the list that I did not have. The power company recommended having extra chargers for your cell phones and things like that. I do have one that works if I'm driving my car, but I need to make sure I get an actual battery bank that doesn't require me driving around to charge my phone. So if you are anxious about things that are happening in the world, one thing that you can do is gather the basics that you should have around anyway in case of emergency. Actually taking action and thinking about your own welfare will reduce your anxiety. Most of us also rely on a certain amount of faith that things will turn out to be okay. This week going forward, start getting organized and make sure your household has some of the basics on hand for emergencies related to the changing seasons. The power seems to often go out in the middle of winter, that kind of thing. If you are liking this podcast, it is now live on Apple Podcasts, which means it is available on several other streaming options. Be sure to subscribe. And until next time, be well.